There are concerns tensions could flare on the Korean peninsula as Australian troops join with US and South Korean personnel in military exercises starting tomorrow. Within the last hour, North Korea has issued a statement saying the joint military exercises will be like pouring gasoline on fire and worsen the state of the peninsula. It went on to warn of an uncontrollable phase of nuclear war. Tonight, we're taking you to North Korea's three nearest neighbours. In Japan, ABC correspondent Liam Cochrane is at a safety drill on the country's west coast. Matthew Carney is on the border between China and North Korea as Beijing prepares for a possible influx of refugees. But we begin in Seoul with Barbara Miller, where residents are ambivalent about the risk to the north.
Yes, that's right. Despite those war games starting tomorrow, South Korea is chalking down the chances of another conflict breaking out. It's been almost 70 years since North and South Korea went to war, and despite the rhetoric, President Moon Jae-in says he's confident the peninsula will not see another military conflict. In the South Korean capital, life pulses on as normal. There are no outward signs the city's 10 million residents think their country could be on the brink of war. And tourists continue to make the hour-long drive to the North Korean border, hoping for a glimpse of life in the reclusive state. Emily Foote is here visiting her friend Lily Smith.
I don't know. I think we're safe.
Yeah, people in Australia are definitely more concerned about North Korea than people in South Korea.
This is a place where people come to post their wishes. Some are personal hopes and aspirations, but the majority are people calling for peace and the unification of the two Koreas. This one here, for example, says, "Peace is coming."
Not soon enough for 84-year-old Gai Chon Lee, who's petitioning for unification.
No country should suffer like this. The poor and innocent suffer the pain of being divided.
Peace doesn't appear to be part of Pyongyang's plan. Overnight, these pictures emerged from the North Korean capital, showing off newly designed propaganda posters. Tomorrow sees the beginning of annual US-South Korean military exercises. Australia will also play a part.
North Korea will have to say something about the military exercise. They will probably say that we will not tolerate any military exercise on the Korean peninsula. This is why we are, building up our military capability.
I'm concerned for my family's safety the most. That's my biggest concern.
I'm not particularly worried because this is how things have always been.
South Koreans are banking on the status quo remaining in place, prepared but not panicked.
Seoul lies just 50 kilometres from North Korea. It's an easy target, but most of the missile tests have been aimed towards Japan. And it's feared any weapon launched at Guam could misfire and hit Japan. ABC correspondent Liam Cochrane is on Japan's west coast, where residents are preparing for the worst.
It's a typical Saturday morning in the coastal town of Koto-ura, except for one thing. This local baseball team is preparing for a missile attack. The drill begins. If North Korea launches a missile over Japan towards Guam, residents would have just over 10 minutes to get to safety, preferably inside a solid building away from windows. Fortunately, it takes much less than that for these young athletes to get to home base.
I feel frightened. You never know when it will be fired and our life will become unstable.
Even if it was a drill, I felt scared thinking that broken pieces of glass could fly towards me.
With the drill over, it's back to the field for these young players. The mayor of the town says sheltering from missiles is something like baseball. Practice is everything. Japan and the United States are poised to shoot down any hostile missiles. The US sending its highest-ranking soldier to reinforce the alliance. Back on Japan's western coast, life goes on, with a watchful eye across these waters.
That was correspondent Liam Cochrane in Japan.
In China, it isn't so much an attack they're worried about, but Beijing is concerned that any conflict could see millions of refugees flood across their border. China correspondent Matthew Carney is on that border to the north.
A look inside North Korea, a nation in decay. It doesn't look primed for confrontation. Millions of North Koreans could cross this border into China if a war breaks out. China is moving to fortify this border and has set up a new border brigade to gather intelligence. And it's also been conducting live-fire drills in the last couple of months. The border city of Dandong supplies most of North Korea's trade, but the trucks that were once a constant stream carrying goods into North Korea have slowed to a trickle. The new UN sanctions are starting to bite. China has banned all coal, iron ore and seafood coming from North Korea, costing the regime more than $1 billion.
China wants North Korea to be punished because its actions seriously undermined and violated international laws and UN resolutions.
But China is not prepared to go all the way to stop North Korea's nuclear and missile program. China is North Korea's sole supplier of oil, and this is where it all comes from, continuously pumped across the border. They don't want the world to see it, so the site is under military protection. The Chinese can do more, but they won't. Behind me is the oil that keeps the North Korean military going and its economy alive. The Chinese won't turn off the taps because they fear collapse of the regime. Dandong doesn't look like the frontier town living with the threat of war. The residents are enjoying the summer holidays.
The US and North Korea are just like friends that shout at each other, but they'll never go to war.
The ties run deep, and this Korean businessman, who doesn't want to be identified, says despite tougher sanctions, the trade goes on.
The smaller companies have more trade now, but they do it in secret.
He says Chinese businesses, with government help, bring North Koreans into China to work on farms and in textile factories.
It's cheaper labour. They can work 15 hours a day for half the price.
The businessman took us to one of the textile factories in the hills behind Dandong. 500 North Koreans work here and are not allowed to leave. They make garments for markets in Europe and America. The workers here will be lucky to make $5 a day.
The workers have to pay 80% to the North Korean government, and they keep just 20% for themselves.
On the border, China has spent millions of dollars on new bridges and free trade zones in the hope of a bigger and deeper partnership with North Korea. But for now, they lie dormant, a testament to the rogue regime's increasing isolation.
China correspondent Matthew Carney there. So tomorrow those war games will begin, and we'll see if that's the provocation that once again raises the stakes in this region.